Hey friends, today I'm going to show you an exciting new experimental feature that landed in Chrome, which is called HTML in Canvas, which is going to unlock futuristic web UIs. And if you're not shipping user-facing code or you have control over what browser you're shipping, you can start using this feature today. But currently this feature is only available under an experimental flag in Chrome. So let's start with a basic canvas. In this example, I have a basic canvas with a button inside of it, and historically when we nested HTML elements inside of canvas, they will be just treated as fallback if the canvas didn't work. So here we're just querying the canvas, the button, and we're getting the context. So how can we treat this button as part of the layout? Well, thanks to HTML in Canvas, we can do that using this new attribute called layout subtree. So now all the nested HTML elements in the canvas are going to be part of the layout. And now we can also listen to an onPaint event that fires when the children change. So we can call context reset to clear the previous canvas state, and we can use this new method context draw element image to draw the element. So we're passing the button and the X and Y position. And just like that, now the HTML element is drawn inside of the canvas. But there's a problem. If we try to interact with the button, nothing happens. And that is because this is just an image of the button. The actual button is still at this position in the DOM at the top left. So we can click on the button and we're going to see it's going to toggle the background. So how can we fix this? Well, thankfully the draw element image returns a transform, which you can apply to the button. So we're going to synchronize their position. And now if we click on the button, we're going to see that it's going to toggle the background. And to size the canvas for high DPI screens and prevent blurriness, you can use the resize observer. So we're going to get the device pixel content box size from the entry, and then we can assign it to the canvas width and height. And this is also a great method to deal with any canvas resizing. Initially this doesn't sound that exciting, but let's think about all of the possibilities this unlocks. So for example, one of those is layout. Now we have access to powerful CSS layout algorithms like Flexbox and Grid. Imagine this being used as a user interface inside of a game. Next we have accessibility. A common criticism of Canvas in the past is that it wasn't accessible. But now you can make crazy user experiences that are accessible. Another benefit are shaders. So not only can we control all of the pixels since it's just an image, now we can also write shaders on the GPU to make this all performant and blazingly fast. And the last point is going to be 3D. This means that we can easily include this inside of a 3D scene using something like Three.js. And we're going to look at some of those examples later. In this example, I'm going to show you how we can take this simple button and manipulate its pixels to create a waving flag effect. So we're going to define some properties like amplitude, speed, frequency. And now inside of onPaint we have the same code as before. We're centering the button, but now we're also assigning the input image from context get image data, and we're assigning output image using new image data to get access to the raw pixels. Next, we're going to create a render function. So we're going to take the input and the output of the raw pixels. And now we're going to loop over each pixel, row and column. And then we're going to paint the image using a request animation frame. To make the button more fancy, I'm going to animate the background using a CSS transition. But now we can actually start our render function to create a cool looking effect. And we can also change the text to see that it's real time. How beautiful is that, friends? But this approach isn't perfect when it comes to performance. So if we imagine this grid as individual pixels, and let's set our target frame rate is 60 FPS, but it can be even higher, including a high resolution like 4K. So in this example, the CPU does work one step at a time, which isn't performant when you're doing this 60 frames per second. And this is where shaders come in. Instead of doing work one step at a time, we can use a shader to do work in parallel. And a shader is just a tiny program that runs on the GPU for every pixel. So we can use a shader to do some work in parallel. In this video, I'm going to use the GLSL graphics API, even though there are more modern graphics APIs like WebGPU, but they are currently experimental. But if you never heard about shaders, basically the most common ones you're going to encounter is the vertex shader, but we're mostly going to be using fragment shaders or pixel shaders, which dictate the color for every pixel. And this is a type of the cool effects that you can create using shaders. So let's look at the shader effect. We're going to create a cyberpunk type of glitch effect using this button. We're going to query the canvas and the content inside of it. And then all we need to do is create a WebGL context by passing WebGL2 and alpha true for transparency. Then inside of onPaint, we're going to use a WebGL texture image. So we can say gl.textElementImage2D, and we can pass a bunch of parameters and the content. I'm mostly going to give you just an idea of how this works because there's a lot of boilerplate code when working with shaders. As you can see, this is a standard GLSL vertex shader. And don't worry if this looks intimidating. You can create any type of shader that you want just by asking AI. So this is the standard WebGL boilerplate. So we need to create a program and then we need to attach a shader, which we need to compile. So in this case we have a vertex shader and a fragment shader. And then we have to link the program. And we're almost done. Now we just need to create a render loop which we can kick off using request animation frame. And now we get this cool effect. Let's look at some cool shader effects from the community. So here is a couple of effects from Matt Rothenberg. So this is a really cool example that uses a focus ring and a shader. As you can see, it illuminates these background dotted patterns. And it's really cool in my opinion. You can even see it has this cool spring effect. And here we also have this cool magnetic cursor effect, so the pixels bend toward your cursor using this cool chromatic aberration. And this is another mind-blowing effect using shaders. So let's say for example that this is some page that you want to transition. Well, we can do that easily with this cool burning effect. And this is just using shaders. Here's more cool HTML in Canvas examples that people have shared online. So here we have HTML in Canvas using 3D. So you can see you can easily include this inside of something like Three.js. And here is a cool example that shows text selection working on a curved surface. And again, we retain all of that goodness from HTML, such as being able to select element, layout, accessibility, and so on. So even if you use the shader, you can create some cool looking CRT effect. Or you can use HTML in Canvas for this magnifying glass effect, which looks super realistic. Here's another fun HTML in Canvas example, Duck Hunt to do. So you can write your to-dos while playing Duck Hunt. Very nice. So here we have another HTML in Canvas example in 3D. So here's a really cool example how HTML in Canvas is being used today by Remotion, a library for making programmatic videos with React. So because you really don't care about the user-facing code, you can start using it today when making videos. And this is really cool in my opinion. We can look at even more examples if we go to htmlincanvas.dev, such as this really cool 3D room with live web content example. So we can enter this, and now we can see this is just HTML. As you can see, we don't need to reinvent layouts and so on, we can just interact with this and change it. That's really cool in my opinion. Alright, so how about this next example? So this is something that you can use today. If you ever needed to create a social share image, you know what a pain in the ass it is to use something like HTML to Canvas. Well, that's no longer the case. Now you can create any type of image using HTML and draw it to the canvas. And the same is true for video. in this HTML video recording, so you can create an animation, draw it to the canvas and download it. How about this fun page curl effect? So we can create this awesome looking effect. How cool is that, friends? As you can see, the future of the web is really exciting. And if you like this video, you can support my work by becoming a patron. Thank you for watching and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace!